Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the latest mission from NASA's Kennedy Space Center. I'm Will Robinson-Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. So good to have you with us here on this Thursday evening. We're broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at KSC. As you can see on the clock in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, SpaceX is now less than 58 minutes away from the planned launch of the Falcon 9 rocket that you see there live at Launch Complex 39A. On board is a mission for the U.S. Space Force. This is the X-37B military spaceplane getting ready to launch on its 8th operational mission after first launching back in 2010. This X-37B, one of two that was built by Boeing on behalf initially of the U.S. Air Force, which is still in the loop for the operational capabilities of this space plane. We'll talk about its previous 7 missions over the course of the next hour, but broadly speaking, the operations of the X-37B are largely secret, though the U.S. Space Force has disclosed some details about what this particular mission is going to be undertaking. So we'll be talking about that again in due course. But first off, I want to thank the nearly 900 of you who are watching along with us live. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button and sharing the stream. Allow some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage as we continue on through the count. With 55 minutes, 46 seconds remaining on the clock, the venting that we're seeing here, this is typical at pad 39A. We see a little bit more venting before things really get rocking and rolling here at the pad, so nothing out of color at this point in time. As we're getting things rolling, I want to thank our moderators in the live chat who are helping us out tonight. Thanks to Rick Donner, Jeff Hansen, and just seeing if there are any of other mods. I got Astro Joe in the house tonight. Thought I saw Mark Otto earlier. Regardless, if you do see any of the other mods cruise on in throughout the course of the broadcast, be sure to give them a big old Spaceflight Now hello. You can make their jobs that much easier just by following the rules of our chat. We ask that you converse in English so that our moderators can respond as appropriate. That you refrain from delving into overt politics or religion. Also, hold off on using all caps in your messages. Popping in a few emojis in your chat is perfectly fine, but if you start to post massive blocks of emojis such that it takes up a huge chunk of the chat, that will also incur the wrath of the moderators. Most importantly, though, we want to remind you to treat each other with the kindness and respect that you yourself would like to be treated as we roll on through our broadcast today. Speaking of our broadcast, we got the full crew out in force tonight. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of the broadcast alongside John Pisani. Adam Bernstein's got the cameras up and situated here at the press site, and Michael Kane is over on the Cape side now for us as well. If you're not following our photography team at their handles here on X, you can find them at ABurnNYC for Adam, MD Kane Jr. for Michael, at John Pisani Photo for John Pisani. And be sure to follow Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. We are also on Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook if you yourself are not on X. We're also joined with tracking assistance this evening by our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images, as well as Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions, who will be checking in a little bit later on in the show. As a reminder at the top of the broadcast, tonight's launch will involve a RTLS, or return to landing site, operation for the first stage booster. What that means for those of you who are in the area of Central Florida, that means that the booster, as it makes its way back towards a touchdown at landing zone 2, will likely create a sonic boom that will be audible for certainly folks in the most immediate vicinity of the landing zone. If you're watching down in the area of, say, Jetty Park or Port Canaveral, it'll likely be quite audible to you, and perhaps for folks a little bit further out as well. So if you've got some friends or family in that neck of the woods in the areas of Cape Canaveral, maybe North Cocoa Beach, a little bit further inland as well, you might want to give them a heads up, especially if they're about to head off to bed and are not paying attention to the launch operations tonight. This and every live launch opportunity is made possible in no small part thanks to our wonderful channel member community here on YouTube. So thanks to folks like Glamper Jan, Macaw SJ, Joni, The Rocket Girl, Craig RS, Charles Boyer, and many, many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to our member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. To that end, I want to welcome in new channel members Wendy Sprayberry and Andrew Newberry, both joining us with membership at the pad leader level. Appreciate you guys. Welcome aboard. I'm glad to have you with us. Also want to thank Macaw SJ for being a member with us now for 5 months. Rick Donner also marking a milestone in membership at 21 months, coming up on 2 years at the launch director level. Rick says, let's launch this bird. Grandpa Jim Pondu also marking 13 months with us at the pad leader level. Jim says, go SpaceX. Also want to thank Macaw for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. So to our newest gifted member, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Macaw in the live chat. And we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership. Last but not least, if you have a comment or question about this mission or other goings-on in the realm of space or spaceflight, you could follow the lead of folks like Bill in Lauderdale by using the YouTube Super Chat feature. Not only will he be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the count, but you'll also be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that, my friends, is always greatly appreciated. Bill with a $5 Super Chat says, hi, all the mods. Let's get the pot going. Thank you, Bill. Speaking of mods, Jeff Hansen with a $10 Super Chat. Thank you, Jeff. Who says, go Kennedy, go SpaceX, go Falcon 9, go X-37B, Godspeed 1092. 1092 is the tail number of today's first stage booster on that there Falcon 9 rocket, getting ready to lift off for its 6th time in its flight history. With 49 minutes remaining on the clock, we're just about 11 minutes away from the point at which SpaceX launch director will make the call on the start of prop load for tonight's Falcon operations. Before we get there, let's go ahead and take a beat to talk about the countdown timeline, the milestones that we're going to be passing through as SpaceX prepares its Falcon 9 rocket for flight. Today's mission set to be the 101st Falcon 9 rocket launch of the year. and the 518th Falcon 9 to date. As has been the case with all 517 Falcon 9s before, the countdown timeline will really get going once the SpaceX launch director does make the call on the start of prop load. SpaceX does its poll electronically, so they can do this readiness check-in a little bit earlier if they feel like they're in a good position to do so. Once the go-ahead for fueling has been given, tanking of a Falcon 9 rocket begins at T-minus 35 minutes. That involves the loading of RP-1, a rocket-grade kerosene on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages, and at the same time liquid oxygen begins flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 30 minutes is when SpaceX will start to load a cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage. Same will be true on the second stage a few minutes afterwards. Helium, of course, is important for the Falcon 9 rocket because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. 23 minutes out, the second stage RP-1 tank reaches flight levels. T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the strong back chill-down process begins. That's SpaceX conditioning the feed lines there at the pad before they start to load liquid oxygen on board the rocket's second stage. Here at pad 39A, we see this visually manifest as the so-called big vent, beginning at T-minus 20 minutes and 30 seconds. About 10 seconds earlier than we see over at pad 40. That venting will last 4 minutes in duration, wrapping up at about 16.5 minutes before flight, 30 seconds before that LOX begins to flow on board the upper stage of the Falcon 9. 7 minutes before takeoff is when SpaceX begins to chill down the 9 Merlin 1D engines at the base of the booster. This involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, and that'll help protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. About 6 minutes before flight, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the retraction of the strong back. First, the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings will open up, and then the transporter erector, otherwise referred to as the strong back, will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket, and it stays in that position until liftoff. At that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes before liftoff, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same is true on the second stage about a minute afterwards, at which point the Falcon 9 is then fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as SpaceX enters into an automated startup with the Falcon 9 rocket, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. At the same time, the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch call at T-minus 45 seconds. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlins are healthy and ignite as expected, the command will be given for the hold-down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff, currently targeting 11:50 p.m. Eastern. That is 0350 UTC for those around the world. Coming up in just about 44.5 minutes from now. Time now, T minus 42 minutes, 37 seconds and counting, as we're awaiting SpaceX to make the call on the start of prop load for today's Falcon 9 mission. I want to go ahead and give you a peek under the hood, if you will, and look at what is on board this particular Falcon 9 flight. Mentioned it was the X-37B military space plane. Here's a look at the X-37B before it was encapsulated inside the payload fairings that you see there on the rocket standing tall at Launch Complex 39A. There are two Boeing-built X-37B space planes. This is the first one that began flying back in 2010. Take a look at the symbol for the mission there emblazoned on one of the payload fairings from SpaceX. Tonight's mission will be the third time that SpaceX launches an X-37B. The other 5 flights have lifted off on board ULA's Atlas V rockets. You've seen one flight of an X-37B on board a Falcon 9 rocket, the other on a Falcon Heavy. That was the USSF-52 mission when we saw the OTV, or Orbital Test Vehicle number 7 mission launch. The reason that Space Force needed the Falcon Heavy for that mission is because the X-37B was launching into a highly elliptical, high Earth orbit. Part of the reasoning for that is to allow for testing of a maneuver known as aerobraking. Following the conclusion of the 7th mission for the X-37B, it made a touchdown over at one of the runways out at Vandenberg Space Force Base. Like the Space Shuttle before it, the X-37B has the capability and the clearance to land either here at the Kennedy Space Center or over at Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. It's unclear once this mission launches how long the X-37B will remain on orbit. Typically, well, I say typically, the past missions that we've seen have lasted at least a year, if not longer. The only exception to that was the very first launch of an X-37B space plane. That lasted less than 300 days, lifting off in April and returning in December of that year. Time now T-minus 37 minutes, 40 seconds and counting. At this point, the SpaceX launch director should have made a call on the start of prop load for tonight's mission. If for whatever reason SpaceX is unable to launch tonight, they do have a backup opportunity on Friday, August 22nd. As far as the weather goes for tonight's mission, it's a pretty decent outlook for this particular Falcon 9 rocket, getting ready to launch from 39A. Meteorologists with the 45th Weather Squadron forecast a 65% chance for favorable weather at the beginning of the window, improving up to 80% by the end of it. That forecast was issued yesterday, citing concerns for possible violations from the cumulus cloud and anvil cloud rules. For those here in Florida, you'll undoubtedly have noticed the thunderstorms that rolled through the area throughout the course of the day today, especially for those of us here on the Space Coast. It's quite calm here at this point in the night. You can see a bit of a breeze, though, by watching the American flag at the top of the flagpole there, in the center of your screen. No rain to speak of since we've been out here for the last few hours, so that's certainly good news. If for whatever reason SpaceX needs to pivot to their 24-hour backup opportunity, the weather is basically a rinse and repeat type of scenario. Not as good at the beginning of the window, slightly better later on in the back half. We are now T-minus 35 minutes and counting, which means SpaceX, assuming they gave the go-ahead for the start of fueling, is now tanking its Falcon 9 rocket. We're going to be looking for those signs of fueling tonight. Thankfully, the heat waves between us and the Falcon booster are not that egregious tonight, so we should actually have a pretty good bead on when the start of fueling actually takes place. Part of the rocket that we're watching right now is near the base of the vehicle. If you see the strong back, which is closer to our camera from this perspective, where the strong back starts to taper in from the base, if you look at that point on the strong back and then bring your eyes over to the rocket, you can see a slight change in gradient from a darker charcoal gray to a slightly lighter shade of gray. Where that transition happens is where we will start to see a bit of a frost line form as the super cold densified liquid oxygen begins to flow on board the Falcon 9's first stage. Given the difference in temperature as well between the super cold LOX and the considerably warmer and more humid Florida air, we should also start to see some vapor form in that region of the vehicle as well. Both are good indications that fueling is underway. However, we are getting an update from SpaceX, who says all systems looking good. Weather is 90% favorable for tonight's launch. And we should be getting pad level views coming up here in about 13 minutes. Give or take. So while not explicitly stating the start of fueling, it sounds indicative that they're feeling good about where they are, considering their countdown clock is still moving. Just waiting to see those visual signs of fueling, since SpaceX didn't explicitly state it in its tweet. But there you can just start to make out some vapor off of the left-hand side of the rocket's booster. And we will take that, folks. That's a good visual indication of fueling, which means SpaceX is locking into that current T0 of 11:50 p.m. Eastern, 0350 UTC. Just under 30 minutes to go ahead of the planned launch of this Falcon 9 rocket, carrying the X-37B spaceplane up into orbit. If you're just now joining us, welcome in. You're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the mission dubbed USSF-36, or X-37B OTV, or Orbital Test Vehicle number 8. I'm Will Robinson-Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now, so good to have you all with us tonight. For those of you who are just settling in, see we've got a little more than 2,200 of you in the live chat. If you haven't at this point, you could do us a big favor, help us out by clicking that like button just beneath the video and sharing the stream. Help allow some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage tonight. I want to thank Parker Isaacson, one of our channel members, for a $10 super chat. Thank you, Parker, who says, great night down here. Got the night shift off, so I'm introducing some coworkers to these launches from Cape Canaveral Beach. That'll be a great spot to watch this launch take place. Appreciate you joining us on our live stream here at Spaceflight Now. Hello to all watching in the Cape Canaveral area. And be sure to hop in the live chat. Let us know where you're checking in from. So we've got Mishi checking in from Southern California. Got Long Beach in the house. A couple folks from Virginia. Timmy Green just across the water here from the launch site. Mary C in downtown Orlando. Kelly asking if this space plane was built by Boeing, and yes, Boeing is the manufacturer of the X-37B, and there are two of them in operation. One of them just completed its flight earlier this year. That was launched on the Falcon Heavy rocket. Of course, we've got the next one coming up here on a Falcon 9. Before we go ahead and hit the so-called big event coming up here in less than 10 minutes, let's just give folks a brief timeline overview of the X-37B missions that have happened in the past. We'll run through these fairly quickly, but as you mentioned, the first launch lifted off on an Atlas V rocket in the 501 configuration. Just to save some repetition, all of the Atlas V rockets that launched in X-37B flew in that 501 model. Apologies for the pause, folks. Just making a quick fix to one of these slides. Let's go back and talk about the previous flights now of the X-37B spaceplane. First began flying, as mentioned, in April of 2010, lifting off on that Atlas V in the 501 configuration. This was the shortest flight of an X-37B to date, lasting less than 225 days in total. In fact, the first several launches of an X-37 were all on Atlas V rockets. Of course, nowadays the Atlas V has its days numbered and it is no longer flying national security missions. Those duties have officially shifted to ULA's Vulcan rocket. So we'll have to wait and see if ULA is going to be tasked with a future launch of the X-37B with Vulcan in the future. Over the course of the X-37B's flight history, it's undergone a number of accomplishments and a number of missions, both explicit that have been described by the Air Force and subsequently the Space Force. A number of them have remained shrouded in secrecy, though. Some of the experiments that have been a little bit more public include a radiation experiment that was done in conjunction with NASA, SEEDS mission that tested and studied a variety of different types of plants in order to learn more about the effects of long periods of radiation exposure. That'll help for future long-duration space missions that, of course, have higher levels of radiation that not only the astronauts but all the cargo on board are exposed to. Missions, say, like to the moon and eventually onto Mars. Some other experiments include collaboration with the Naval Research Laboratory, looking at technology designed to harness solar energy and transmit it to the ground. Flight 7, which launched on the Falcon Heavy rocket, demonstrated that aero-braking maneuver. There have also been some experiments concerning space domain awareness technology as well. Take a look at your screen. We've got the big vent underway as SpaceX is thermally conditioning the feed lines there at the pad ahead of second stage liquid oxygen load. This vent will last about 4 minutes in total, setting up for the LOX to flow at the 16-minute mark, coming up in just about 4 minutes from now. Time now T minus 17 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. Got just a little less than a minute left on this big vent. So far, everything progressing smoothly for an on-time liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket from Historic Launch Complex 39A. Time now T minus 16 minutes, 13 seconds and counting. Call just occurred for second stage LOX loading to begin. Now getting pad level views of the Falcon 9 rocket. You can see the X-37B mission logo on the Falcon 9 payload fairing. There you go, nice closer look at that. And the Space Force logo just beneath it. Once on orbit, the X-37B will be managed by the 5th Space Operations Squadron, part of the U.S. Space Force's Delta IX. They'll do those day-to-day operations in partnership with the Air Force's Rapid Capabilities Office. As I mentioned during the earlier parts of the broadcast, the X-37B has been used as an experimental test bed for a variety of operations. This particular X-37B is going to be demonstrating laser communications, similar to what we've seen with, of course, SpaceX's Starlink constellation, as well as its government-made Starshield. This is a little hype video that was produced by Boeing. This is the updated version, of course, highlighting SpaceX. There are a rendering of the X-37B, which we did ask if they will be deploying any payloads as part of this mission, and told that that information was not able to be released according to the U.S. Air Force. There's a lot about the X-37B that remains classified, so many questions that we had, unfortunately, were not able to be answered. In addition to the laser communication demonstration, though, this particular X-37B will also be performing a demonstration of what the Space Force calls, quote, the world's highest performing quantum inertial sensor ever used in space, end quote. The sensor is designed to detect the rotational acceleration of atoms in order to determine its position in orbit. This particular technology is designed to be used in areas where the GPS constellation is not easily accessible, and that'll help build in additional redundancy for position and navigation capabilities for the U.S. Space Force, as well as the other branches of the U.S. military, and as tends to be the case with technology developed by the DoD, will likely enter into the public domain at some point a little bit further down the road. Talking about the Falcon 9 rocket with these SpaceX graphics. The upper stage of the Falcon 9 rocket powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, which produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust. At the top of the stack are those payload fairings currently encapsulating the X-37B, made up of a carbon composite material and stand 13.1 meters or 43 feet in height, and are 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. SpaceX notes that the fairing halves on this mission are fairly new. One is brand new, flying for its first time, and the other for a second time. SpaceX is working to certify both its fairing halves as well as its first stage boosters for up to 40 missions apiece. SpaceX commentators note that they are tracking no issues right now on the Falcon 9 rocket, which is certainly good news. Want to welcome a new channel member, Sherry Whitten Vagianos, joining us with membership at the pad leader level. Welcome in, Sherry. We're glad to have you with us. We're coming up on the 10-minute mark in the count, just about 3 minutes away from the engine chill sequence, when SpaceX will flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping to protect them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. Before we get to that mile marker, though, let's go ahead and talk about where this Falcon 9 is going to be flying once it leaves the pad. Let's talk a little trajectory, shall we? After lifting off from Historic Launch Complex 39A, the Falcon 9 rocket will head off from Florida Space Coast and fly in a generally northeasterly trajectory. So for folks in the areas of northeast Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, and on up the East Coast, keep your eyes to the skies, and hopefully you've got some clear conditions in your neck of the woods, and you might just catch a glimpse of this Falcon 9 rocket as it climbs uphill. If you do happen to get some views of the Falcon 9 rocket, we'd love to see what you're able to capture, so go ahead and tag us on social media. We're in most places just simply at Spaceflight Now. Following stage separation, the first stage booster will perform a boost back burn and a flip maneuver to target a touchdown over at Landing Zone 2. If you haven't seen a launch with us in a while, you may be asking why Landing Zone 2 and not Landing Zone 1. Well, as the case so happens, Landing Zone 1 has made its final touchdown, and that was back on August 1st in support of NASA's Crew 11 mission to the International Space Station. At this point, that pad is being started to turn over to Via Space and Phantom Space in order to support launches of their rockets. Eventually, the same will be the case with Landing Zone 2, but until this particular landing zone is more needed by Via and Phantom, and SpaceX has its new landing pads established at Launch Complex 39A as well as Slick 40, then SpaceX will continue to use this pad for return to landing site or RTLS missions. As we mentioned, the fairing halves will be recovered on this mission as well. After making their atmospheric reentry, they will splash down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of steerable parachutes. Once down in the water, they'll be brought aboard one of the recovery vessels for SpaceX, brought back through Port Canaveral, turned over to the Hangar X site, and then refurbished and turned around for future missions. 7 minutes and counting. At this point, the engine chill sequence should be underway. Time now T minus 6 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. Coming up in just about 15 seconds, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Today's flight will be the 6th mission for this particular first stage booster, B1092. Let's take a quick moment just to review the flight history for this particular booster. First began flying with a Starlink mission, Starlink 12-13 on February 27th. That was followed up by a mission for the National Reconnaissance Office, NROL 69, on March 24th. A Cargo Dragon mission was up next on April 21st, the most recent cargo flight to the International Space Station. That was followed up by the launch of a GPS satellite, Space Vehicle number 8, and most recently it launched the Starlink 10-34 mission on June 28th. Getting ready to lift off once again on flight number 6 in just a little more than 5 minutes from now. Teams are about to pressurize for strong back retract. We'll see the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings open up, and then the transporter erector, otherwise referred to as the strong back, will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket and stay in that position until liftoff. There you see the clamp arms starting to open up, release the Falcon 9 rocket. Then we'll see the strong back get into motion. Confirmation that the X-37B spacecraft is now on internal power. Coming up on 3 minutes is when the first stage liquid oxygen tank should finish topping. Confirmation of stage 1 LOX load. There will be a similar call on the second stage coming up in less than a minute. Coming up on the end of fueling here in about 10 seconds.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And with that call, the Falcon 9 rocket is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. That additional venting you're seeing there are the ground gas closeouts. Coming up on the final minute before liftoff.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Good call for Falcon 9 being in startup. We're now just awaiting the SpaceX launch director to give their go for launch.
This is the mission director. Go for launch.
And a good go for launch call. We're now just a little more than 30 seconds away from the flight of this Falcon 9 rocket carrying the X-37B spaceplane. "15 seconds. And here we go in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and a liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the USSF-36 mission carrying the X-37B military spaceplane back into orbit. Falcon 9 rocket now traveling faster than the speed of sound, approaching max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Falcon 9 now throttling up on its engines, preparing for chill down of the Merlin vacuum engine. Confirmation of engine chill in the second stage. We're coming up on several events in fairly rapid succession now. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff. MECO at about T plus 2 minutes and 14 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation, the ignition of that second stage engine, a boost back burn, and the fairing separation. Now 2 minutes into flight, less than 15 seconds to MECO. You see MECO, stage separation, stage engine start.
Confirmed.
So we just heard that call out for stage separation, and with...
Stage 1 boost back startup.
All right, so with the boost back burn, that'll last about 45 seconds. Meanwhile, we should be hearing a call out for fairing separation in just a few moments.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Confirmation of fairing separation. because this is a national security mission, we are not going to be getting second stage views of the Falcon 9 rocket with the X-37B spaceplane. Seeing onboard camera views now, though, of the booster performing the boost back burn, which is just now concluding. Now about 3.5 minutes into the flight here. Coming up next will be the start of the entry burn, which will use 3 out of the 9 Merlin engines to begin to slow the vehicle down. Seeing the glow of the second stage, that Merlin vacuum engine, courtesy of our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. The entry burn set to begin just before the 7-minute mark in today's flight. As we're waiting for the start of that entry burn, getting some live views inside of the Mission Control Center there in Hawthorne, California. Again, because this is a national security payload, they're not showing upper stage views of the Falcon 9 rocket publicly. A little more than 5 minutes into the mission now at this point, a little less than 2 minutes away from when we'll see the entry burn begin. As a reminder, this booster is going to be making a touchdown back at landing zone 2. So for folks in the vicinity of the pad and potentially even a little bit further out into Central Florida, you may hear that sonic boom as the booster makes its way back through the atmosphere. Now a little more than 6 minutes into flight, we're coming up on the start of the entry burn here. About 30 seconds from now. Watching tracking views from our team right now, looking up at the second stage, the glow of the Merlin vacuum engine as we're waiting for the start of the entry burn. Entry burn should be getting underway now. Actually, SpaceX says that we're just about 20 seconds away from, there he goes, the start of the entry burn. With the conclusion of the entry burn, we're now looking for the start of the landing burn, set to begin at about T plus 8 minutes and 6 seconds, according to the SpaceX timeline of things. A good touchdown at LZ2 will make the 13th landing at that particular site. little more than 8 minutes into flight, coming up on the start of the landing burn momentarily. There you can see that landing burn. Make sure you've got your volume turned up. We should be hearing the sonic boom momentarily. And there we go.
And that was the 6th launch and landing for this first stage.
And again, because this is a military mission, the U.S. Space Force has requested that views of the upper stage not be provided. So we're going to go ahead and start to wind down our coverage by first checking in with our live chat. I want to thank a few folks in the chat for your support tonight. So we've got Jeff Quintrall who says, come on, viewers. No, that's a very nice. Come on, viewers, cough up a little extra donation to keep this channel going. We certainly appreciate all of you that are able to chip in with the YouTube Super Chat feature, but we certainly just appreciate you also being here and watching the coverage. That is great way to support us in and of itself. Paratrooper Chad says that he was headed up to the roof in Fort Lauderdale to watch the launch. Hopefully you got some good views there, Chad. JR Pestle with a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you, JR. Says, go SpaceX, go Falcon. Another channel member, Yazada, with a $10 super chat who says, thanks for the great Spaceflight Now coverage. You're very welcome. Thanks for your support of the coverage. Jordan Jean Gerard with a $1 super chat. Thank you, Jordan. Mermaid Labs also with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Mermaid. Skunk Hogger PS4 with a $10 super chat who says, thanks for another interesting evening. Thank you, PS4. Jim Ebo with a also very generous $20 super chat. Thank you, Jim. Who says, thanks for all you do to make this feed. Angela Vandenberg with a $5 super chat as well, who says, I never tire of watching these launches. Bill in Lauderdale back again, tossing in a $5 for the mods. And Kenneth Urbanek with a $5 super chat, who says, thanks, Will, mods, Cumulus, Granatus, and Spaceflight Now for all you do for us. Turning now to our mission stats as they currently stand with a good liftoff and landing of the first stage booster. That marked the wrap up for flight number 6 of tail number B1092. This was the 518th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 101st of the year so far. This was SpaceX's 454th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was the 153rd orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 116th orbital flight from Pad 39A, and the 210th overall orbital launch from this pad as well. Here's where our bar chart now currently stands. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was the 13th good landing down at Landing Zone 2 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. That marked the 66th landing in the Sunshine State of Florida, the 93rd landing on land, if you include those in California, and this was the 490th booster landing for SpaceX successfully. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 70th launch from Florida so far this year, the 107th from U.S. soil, the 118th from U.S. Rocket Company, and the 185th orbital launch around the world. So far, there have been 5 orbital failures. Here is where our pie chart now currently stands. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Now's a great time to do so, as we do have quite a busy wrap-up to our week. Got a Starlink launch that is currently on the calendar for tomorrow morning for the folks out in California. The flight of Starlink 17-6, carrying 24 Starlink V2 mini satellites out of Launch Complex 4 East. A couple days later, on Sunday morning, we have the CRS-33 mission getting ready to send several thousand pounds of cargo and supplies up to the International Space Station. And that particular Dragon spacecraft will remain docked a little bit longer than your typical Dragon cargo mission. And that's because it's going to be performing some additional boost operations for the station. Help to preserve some more of the fuel on the Russian side of the ISS as NASA, Roscosmos, and the international partners look towards the ultimate end of the International Space Station in the next 5 years and are starting to make some plans accordingly. Then, of course, as things currently stand right now, we've got the planned launch of Starship Flight 10 out from Starbase, Texas. That mission's set to lift off in the evening Central Time. 6:30 is when that hour-long window opens. 7:30 Eastern, 23:30 UTC. Right now, you've got the Super Heavy booster there on the orbital launch mount, and Ship 37 will soon follow. Again, currently targeting Sunday evening for that launch. And then many more to start the week, so we hope to see you right back here for all of our live launch coverage of those missions and many others. Also, stay tuned to the YouTube channel. We've got some stuff going up tomorrow regarding the upcoming Starship flight. Also, if you're here on the Space Coast, tomorrow is the 7th Space Coast Symposium and Expo. You might see some familiar faces hopping around there. Myself and Mr. John Pisani will be out and about at the symposium, so we hope to see you out there. And if you do spot us, be sure to stop by and say hello. We love meeting folks out in the world. Couple more mentions in the live chat here. Thanks to Psychonaut69 for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Appreciate that, Psychonaut. Mr. Dude number 2 with a $5 super chat, who says that sonic boom was wild from Cape Canaveral Beach. Psychonaut once again with a super chat saying the mods rock. And then Mike M hitting at the buzzer with a $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Mike. Really appreciate the support at that level. Speaking of those mods who rock, want to thank our moderators in the live chat who've been helping us out this evening. Big thanks to Astro Joe, Rick Donner, Jeff Hansen. Also want to thank Cumulus Granadas for helping to answer folks' questions in the live chat as well. Remember, you can always keep tabs on the pads here in Florida and in Texas by heading over to our 24/7 stream, Launchpad Live, here on the YouTube channel. Want to thank our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs for their help with streaming and tracking this Falcon 9 rocket as it made its way uphill. Big thanks to our photographer team around the Cape for capturing this moment. Thanks to John, Michael, and Adam. You could follow them at their handles here on X. Big thanks to Stephen Young, our Spaceflight Now editor, who's running the technical operations of the broadcast tonight alongside John. Most importantly, though, thanks to you for wherever you've been watching from. Certainly appreciate your time and attention, and we look forward to welcoming you back in when next we have a launch to cover, which seems like will be just about every day as we head into the weekend. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson-Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. We will see you next time, folks, and until then, bye-bye.